In this episode, you'll discover how to navigate the messy middle of life, from menopause and grief to divorce, career change, and you'll learn how to choose yourself again. Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, a podcast helping women in career and life transitions achieve clarity on their next steps so they can transform uncertainty into an energizing next chapter. I'm your host, Kavita Ahuja, and the founder of It's My Time Now Coaching. If you're wondering what's next in your career or life, you are in the right place. Through solo and guest episodes, you'll gain practical tips, tools, and inspiration to help you uncover blocks, gain confidence, and be, do, and have what you want. I rediscovered myself after the age of 50, and I know you can too. It's my time now to help you do just that. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast. If you're in a season where life feels different, uncertain, or harder to recognize, this conversation will speak to you. Today, we're exploring what it really means to move through midlife transitions with honesty and self-compassion, especially when you're navigating identity shifts, grief, people-pleasing, menopause, career change, or the quiet realization that you can no longer keep putting yourself last. And be sure to stay with us until the end, because I'll be sharing a few key takeaways from my wonderful conversation with Angela Burke that I think will really stay with you. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Midlife Reinvention Podcast. Today, I'm super pleased to be joined by Angela Burke. Angela is the author of Real Girl's Guide to Midlife, and she brings something I deeply appreciate to this conversation: honesty. Just real stories about divorce and menopause and career shifts, grief, reinvention, and the messy middle. Angela spent 30 years in high-tech marketing before retiring, only to discover a book idea that she had written down 20 years earlier. And what unfolded from there is such a powerful example of what can happen when a woman stops telling herself that she can't. So thank you so much for being on the show, Angela. I really love your story, and I love it that it didn't really begin with like a grand reinvention, and it began with this red folder that you told me about. So maybe we can start there. And the book, the idea you started at, I think you were 35 years old, and that was after you retired and you found this folder that had the notes in it. So what did it bring up for you, and what made you kind of finally say that I'm doing this now? And how does that maybe relate to the idea that it's really our time now to choose us, to choose me?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I love your podcast, and really I'm grateful for the opportunity to chat. And so what it sort of brought up for me, finding the folder, and that's exactly what happened. The folder had been literally and figuratively buried in a very small pile on my desk that I didn't even realize was there, to be totally honest with you. And when I retired, I sort of was cleaning out that pile, and I opened the folder and I realized that a lot of the same topics and questions and confusion and issues that I sort of felt like I was dealing with at 35 were still here, plus a whole set of new ones. And I also realized I lived a lot of life in that 20-year period, but a lot of the same feelings that I had, which were, hey, nobody's really talking about these things. Am I the only one that's feeling all this confusion? And am I the only one that's experiencing all these things? And I intellectually knew that I'm not. I wasn't. I never was. But it kind of brought all those things back again. Like, yeah, I got a lot smarter. A lot of things happened. Some of the things that I thought were sort of these big questions that I had at 35, maybe they weren't so big. And they were also replaced with a whole set of new ones that I couldn't even have contemplated at 35.
Right.
And I think what made me decide now was the time was like, I spent a lot of my life and a lot of my career asking questions like, oh, who am I to think I could do something? Why me? Why this? Why that? And what I realized at that point was the question needed to pivot. Why not me? Why not now? And so that gave me the confidence to just sort of go, yeah, I'm going to write the book. And yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. And yeah, I don't know if anybody's going to read it, but I'm going to do it because why not?
I love that. I love those questions. Why not me and why not now? Those are so important. Because what happens is often, and you've seen this probably with people you work with, and I've seen it with my clients, is that so many women do stay stuck, right? They stay stuck, or like something happens, there's a trigger, and then they just leap into action right away. And they don't take the time to kind of assess that in between. I mentioned that little messy middle in between. And I think it's really important. I mean, I don't know if you'll agree with me, but the real transformation really happens in that kind of middle part of the transitions that we go through, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that from your own experience. What did that messy middle look like? And what were you sitting with, and maybe some lessons for women based on that experience?
Yeah. And I think that you're absolutely right. I love a good before and after story. Who doesn't? But a lot that gets sort of left out of some of those stories is, what is all that stuff in the middle? And for me, I realized, and especially kind of looking back at my 40s in particular, that was the decade where I went through the most amount of change. And when you're in it, you don't sort of recognize it for what it is. It just felt hard. But I was struggling with a lot of things. I was at a crossroads in my career. I divorced. I had 3 young kids. I was trying to establish a new life as a single mom. What does that look like? I took on a couple of different jobs that were very, very stressful. So I was working a lot. And I didn't realize at that point in my mid-40s in particular, how close I was to exiting, to kind of entering my post-menopause state. I had no idea. I just knew that I was not the best version of myself at that time. I was ragey. I was exhausted. My periods were all over the map, but I had no idea I was so close to starting kind of this post-menopausal era. And I just attributed it to new life, new identity, job, being a single mom. And it was so easy for me to do that. And then a lot of the wiring that I have sort of been processing my whole life, which was, we just take on. I just take on. I am the emotional regulator. I am the peacekeeper. I am the one who has to care about everybody else, fix the things that are broken, all while not making waves and not causing grief. And so I just kind of took it. And it was really, really hard. And yeah, there was a lot of funny stuff, sure, that happens in that middle. Fast forward, exiting out of kind of my 40s, a lot of things changed for me. And I was able to sort of identify my part in some of that, where the root of some of those struggles were. And then how do I kind of unlearn some of these natural behaviors? And that's what I had to do. And what I realized was, like, I spent a lot of time just editing myself. I was always there. The really great parts about me that made me me, I just spent a lot of time editing out. And I recognized that in my 40s. I started to feel like I was drifting closer to the edges of my own life. And I didn't even recognize myself in a lot of ways. So it was kind of this reclamation, right? Like, I was reclaiming a lot of the things about me, my place in the world, how I felt about certain decisions that I made and what I wanted out of my future. It wasn't like I was reinventing necessarily. I was just reclaiming because they were always there.
You mentioned something thanks for sharing that. You mentioned something about unlearning, right? And because we have so many decades of expectations, you mentioned taking on everything, taking on everybody, expectations around motherhood, around our careers, around relationships, and other expectations that we kind of have learned over the decades, right? So based on that, like, what would you say, based on your experience, what did you have to unlearn? And what are some of the things that you could share with women? Like, what are some of the top beliefs that you would recommend that they start letting go of?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think a lot of the process, even for writing the book, it was a lot of my own stories and sort of acknowledging things about my life and my history And I had the pleasure of meeting so many women who shared their story and also experts. And there are these kind of red threads that sort of connect some of these things for many of us. And I think one of the things relative to unlearning that was really important to me, it's not like you could apply it to any one part of your life, right? It's around beauty, motherhood, partnership, being the good girl, being the quiet girl. And some of the beliefs that showed up for me were the fact that I held this belief that somehow I wasn't enough. I wasn't enough just being, that I couldn't say no. And if I did say no to anything, I had to follow it up with some dissertation, which is just ridiculous. And that somehow I existed to make other people comfortable. And I think what I saw repeated in some of the patterns that I wrote about for myself, and also a lot of the women who shared their stories, was a lot of these things are modeled for us, right? Or we're either consciously or subconsciously rewarded for keeping the peace, playing small, shrinking. And these become the stories that define us. And for me, I believed for a long time that somehow my happiness and my pleasure needed to come last on the list. That if I put myself and my happiness and my pleasure first on the list, it meant somebody else or many others would suffer. And how do I take on that responsibility and that burden for other people suffering? And what I think was also really reaffirming for me in talking to women and also talking to experts for the book is this idea that now is the time. And the beauty is you don't have to have a perfect plan. Because I'm a good planner. I like a good plan. I like a good plan. I like an A plan, a B plan, and a C plan. I like to imagine worst case scenarios. I like to be prepared. But you just need to start. And you just have to begin. And for me, a lot of that is, it's even as simple as, so somebody had asked me this question not too long ago. If you could have one piece of advice for a woman who's struggling with something. I said, well, pick the thing that you're struggling with. And sometimes that means you have to quiet the noise around you. Do you find yourself saying yes to things that you really want to say no to? Are you tired and just not asking for rest? Are you depleted because you're giving so much to other people and you're not taking care of yourself? Find the thing. And for me, that thing was saying no. I really had to work on how to say no. So pick a thing this week that you're going to say no to and just say no. And if no feels uncomfortable, how about I'm not available? That's 3 words.
Yes.
Or here's somebody asked you to do something. Well, here's what I can do. So I'm not going to do the thing you asked me to do. I don't want to. I'm not available, whatever the reason is. But here's what I can do. That's it. Try that.
Yeah. Those are great. I so relate to that. And you said that if I put myself first, others would suffer. Yeah. And I think that's really the whole gist of what this stage in our lives, we should actually put ourselves first. And that's why actually my program is called It's My Time Now.
Right.
And it's not being selfish at all.
No.
It's putting yourself in finally, we have given decades to others. And when we start peeling away at this, not that there was anything wrong with it.
No.
I mean, we're naturally givers, but how about start giving to ourselves, I guess is the key from what I gather that you just shared.
100%. And I think it's also releasing the belief that you need to have a perfect plan, that you need somebody else's permission or validation to act. And I also think one of the other things is I don't, and I write about this in the book when kind of toward the end of the book, I have a section called the manifesto. And I really don't think it's about blowing up your whole life, right? But it's about identifying the things that you want to change, saying them out loud even to yourself. That's a really big practice through the process of writing this book that I started to do. When I find for me, when I say something out loud, even if it's to myself, if it's something that I want, if it's something that I don't want, if it's a feeling that I have, it almost interrupts the pattern of thinking. And it almost rewrites the next best action by just saying it out loud. So I find I talk to myself a lot, but it's this practice of just saying what you need out loud.
It makes it real almost.
It makes it real, and it does something to the brain. It changes the brain receptors to, hey, I'm feeling this thing, and I'm going to go to the 1 or 2 elements of my playbook that I'm used to, but it almost like interrupts it. And then it kind of forces you to go, wait a second, I don't have to do that thing. Wait a second, I don't have to act in this way.
Yeah, it's interesting because we talk about the inner critic, and the inner critic is really those thoughts in our head, right? That are telling us these things. But that's an interesting concept, because if you're actually verbalizing it, then the thoughts actually get interrupted. And so it switches the thought.
It switches the thought. And it's okay if you don't have a new thought to replace it. But man, you're not going back to the old one. That's a huge step. That's a huge first step.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's a good tip. I know that in your book, you also, you talk a lot about honesty, about grief. So we can grieve things like marriages or children that have maybe gone and left the nest, or younger versions of ourselves either. So what do you say that how can we deal with that kind of grief? I guess it's a different type of grief, because we're kind of leaving some parts of ourselves. But how can we navigate that grief without feeling like maybe that we're failing?
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's so natural for us to feel that way, right? And I think that you hit it. You can grieve a lot of things. You can grieve relationships that end. You can grieve identities of yourself that have changed. You can, if you're a parent, you can grieve the fact that maybe once your household was super noisy and now it's really quiet. You can grieve the life that you imagine you'd be living at any point in time if it looks different. And so first, I think, and this is kind of a practice that I follow, but it was also reaffirmed for me in all the women that I spoke to for the book, and then the experts, is, starting by acknowledging it and acknowledging the feeling, and by acknowledging it and naming it out loud, and even saying to yourself, like, this is how I'm feeling about this thing, you move toward acceptance. And I think one of the other shifts that are really important is that grief or change is not a failure. Sometimes different is just different. And even the smallest steps, by taking some action, even a small step, we're moving towards something else. And I think that with the idea that different or change comes shame, embarrassment, sadness, that all leads to this feeling of failing. But really, it's just different. And a lot of what I heard reinforced by a lot of the experts that I talked to is that often when we can get to this place of acceptance, good things come from change. And that comes from just different. But it starts with just that quiet acknowledgement to ourselves that, hey, yeah, this does not look like I thought it would. And how does it feel? For me, one of the biggest changes that I think I've gone through over the last probably 10 years is going from parenting. I have 3 boys myself. My long distance fiance, he and I have 7 kids together. But especially with my 3, it's moving from parenting little kids to parenting adults. That's hard. It's really hard. And it's a little bit lonely. It's a little bit isolating. And I feel like my boys have left me in a way. And I'm like, wow, this is like the worst breakup I think I've ever been through. But it started with just acknowledging and putting a name to it.
Yeah.
And that helped me move to acceptance.
They never leave you, by the way. I have 2 older ones.
It just, I don't know about you, like some days it just feels like, and it's like, wow.
Like you always felt like you were wanted in a certain way. And then when they grow up, they want you in a different way. But you have to kind of believe the way that
this is it, right?
Wanted to, yeah.
It's a perfect example. It's a change and it's different. And it's just different. It doesn't mean it's a failure. It doesn't mean that they've broken up with me forever, but it means that my relationship with them is going to look a little bit different. And that's okay. And it's good for them and it's good for me. But man, there are some days where it feels really, really sad and really lonely. And it was something, I think one of the other things that comes sometimes out of this grief is we don't expect it. Right? Even I was talking to a woman recently who's like, man, I walk by my reflection in the mirror. And some days I'm like, who is that staring back at me? And nobody talks to us about the fact that we could grieve an identity. Or I have another friend who's going through a divorce after being married for 35 years. In her head, she's living in this place right now. She's like, I never thought I'd be at this age, we're in our mid-50s, and I'd be here, that my life would look like this. So she's grieving the life that she imagined she was going to have at this point. Yeah. Like, we don't expect that to sort of hit us in a way that it is.
Yes. What about the career aspect? Like I know you were in a long-term career and you transitioned into
Yeah.
to what you're doing now. I think in my experience, there's a lot of people I work with, they're so used to doing what they were doing.
Oh, yeah.
And so when that goes away or when they leave it or when whatever happened, then they get laid off or they leave it intentionally, there is that grief of the loss of the career and the identity of who you were in that career, right? Because oftentimes our careers, we feel that they're our identity and they're not. And that's the work, right? Is to separate the identity from the career, from the relationship, from all of that. So did you experience that when you left your career?
That's a really, really good question. For me, Ani shared that. A lot of who I was and how I defined myself was wrapped into my work and how I worked. And I think it bled a lot into how I lived my life. I was known as the fixer. I was known as the competent and capable one. I was the one at work who people gave the hard things to. I was trusted during times of growth or layoffs or when things were happening at the companies that I worked with. I was the trusted set of hands. I remember leaders describing me as that. So I took on a lot of these kind of hard things and it became woven into my identity and just reinforced because that's who I was when I wasn't at work. I was the reliable one. I was the competent one. And it was like these two things kind of came together for me when I retired and I started writing this book. I think I had the good fortune of writing, and look, I didn't have a master plan.
Mm-hmm.
I found the folder in December of 24. I gave myself until April of 25 to ask myself those questions. Who am I to write a book? Should I write a book? And then decided, well, why the hell not? I'm going to write the book. And so it was cathartic for me in a lot of ways because I can identify the things that I was feeling and then I would write about them and go, oh man, I need to take a different action. But for me, a lot of these things became woven.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I realize now though, is that there are still very, very valuable traits that I like out of that identity. However, it's not only how I define myself.
Yes. And that's really important point. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
No. It's such an important point because oftentimes women come to me and say, I have to just leave everything and just start you fresh. And I'm like, no, you don't.
You don't.
Because there's certain parts of what you were doing that you actually liked and that you were good at. And you can bring those into a new identity or just something new that you're doing. You don't have to forget it all and start from fresh.
No, you absolutely don't. And I think that was sort of what I realized that in any, there's a quote, I think it's like any strength overplayed can become a weakness. So being known as the fixer or the problem solver, look, there's some currency in it. Mm-hmm. And I don't hate all of that, but now I get to control what do I involve myself in to fix and how deep am I going to involve myself? So I'm taking more control and power back versus kind of letting the system around me suck me in and then kind of looking at it and going, wait, why is this all happening to me? No. I allowed it to happen and just being conscious and present. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so now even the silliest things like if I look back to my 30s and my 40s, when the kids were small, the idea of asking for help or saying that I needed rest felt to me like a sign of weakness or laziness. Right. And then I don't feel like that.
No.
If I need rest, guess what I'm going to do? I need rest. Again, 3 words. Or if I'm sitting in a conversation, and I remember being at work and sitting in conversations and sort of like, I knew a lot. Turns out I knew a lot when I was working and I still know a lot. But I let a lot of the stories sort of define me about, oh, she's an execution machine and she's not strategic enough and she's not visible to the right executives. Well, I wasn't, because all of the stuff that I worked on was clean. I didn't have any problems. So often in the companies I worked with, you were only visible to executives when your stuff wasn't clean. It was riddled with problems. I remember sitting in meetings and having these thoughts and being able to spot things before even a lot of the executives realize what the risks or the problems could be. And I would hold back because I would say to myself, who am I to think I could say anything? And what do I know? And the flip side to that is I have an opinion. That's 4 words.
Yeah.
So now when I'm in conversations, I don't sit back. I don't let the conversation, I don't question, should I say something? Should I not? I say it.
Yeah. I love
I
that.
have an opinion, 4 words.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into, like, I remember when we first met, I really shared some stories. It's kind of this like, watch me energy. So you talked a little bit about how you're now you're taking drum lessons, or
Yes,
I think you mentioned something about trucker hats, or now you're writing a book at 50, or you wrote a book at 55.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you, because that is a kind of the flip side of fear, is how do we develop the courage to do these things? And how can listeners, based on what you have described, how can a woman reconnect with that part of herself, right? That she's kind of been shrinking away from for years. And how can she get that sassy, watch me energy?
Yeah. Well, it's a really good question. And I love that you talked about trucker hats and drums, but I'll give you the trucker hat story real quick. So basically, I love a good trucker hat. I always have. Do I look good in them? I don't know, but I love a good trucker hat. So I was with a girlfriend when I was writing the book. She and I were together and I wore a trucker hat. She's like, "What are you wearing?" And I said, "Well, I'm wearing a trucker hat." She's like, "Why? We're too old to wear trucker hats." And I think there was a little voice in my head that was like, "Oh man, maybe she's right." But then it was immediately intercepted with, "What? What? If I want to wear a damn trucker hat, guess what? I'm going to wear a trucker hat. If I want to wear a bikini to the beach, guess what I'm going to wear? Bikini to the beach." I've come too far, and I am too exhausted to have to listen to people tell me who I am and define me and tell me what I can and can't do. And maybe it's all the hormones that have left the building. Maybe it's because I am truly exhausted of trying to play this part for years and years and years and trying to please everybody. But man, tell me I can't wear a trucker hat. And guess what I wear now every time I see her? Every time I wear a brand new trucker hat. Drum lessons is the other thing, right? I decided on a whim that I wanted to learn how to play the drums. Do I need permission to do that? Can I sit and wallow in, am I too old? I'm never going to pick this up. I can tell myself any story I want. Or I could say, guess what? I have the time and the means. I'm going to take drum lessons.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's it. Yeah. It's just about taking that, having the courage to take that step. Yeah.
Take a step. And you have to start with stop the negative talk, right? You'll hear it. Because look, and I'm not perfect. I'm a people pleaser at my core. But what I've learned through these practices is I could identify the voice in my head, or I identify the pattern, or feel myself taking an action, and I could intercept it a little bit faster. I can short circuit the, oh my gosh, here's the old way of thinking or the old belief or the old action to, I'm going to do something different. And I can see it. I can almost hear it. I can feel myself being pulled in a direction. But now I can at least spot it and go, no. That's not what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So I do think, I'm thinking that's the trick, right? And how do you even get to that point, right? I think how you get to that point is sometimes you have to quiet the noise and see what's happening in your own brain and in your own life. Are you saying yes to things that you want to say no to? Are you tired? Are you feeling this pull and this drag to do things and be somebody that you don't want to be? Stop. And just go, wait, something is happening for me. And then say it out loud. What is it? Well, the trucker hat. I'm pissed that somebody told me I can't wear a trucker hat. So what am I going to do with that? And even a small step can be a meaningful leap towards something different.
Absolutely. I mean, I was going to ask you, what are some honest first steps you can take to reclaim power? And then I think you mentioned the quiet noise. Take the small steps. You have a lot of exercises in your book and tools. What are some other ways for a woman who may be at this stage, who's feeling stuck, maybe grieving something that they've lost and questioning everything? So what are maybe some from the experts that you've spoken to, the women that you've interviewed, and any other tips or steps?
I think that and these things can show up physically, emotionally, professionally. Like I said, I think the key is just starting to spot the moment you feel like you're starting to disappear. And shrinking shows up really quickly, right? Especially for us for me in my mid-50s when it's just the way I've lived my life. Saying yes to something you want to say no to. You're softening your opinion. You're finding yourself sliding to the edges of your own life. Say the thing you need out loud, even if it's to yourself. Don't say it in your head, but say it out loud. I'm not available. I need a break. I disagree. Because you name your need and it interrupts that pattern. So there, all of a sudden, just by doing something like that, you're taking up space in your own life. One of the things I write about in the book, I think I referenced this earlier, is this manifesto. But the full exercise is in the book, but you can start with one simple thing. Pick one thing that you're done carrying, whether it's a belief about yourself, it's a pattern of behavior or thinking that you want to just release, and something that you want to reclaim. And you write it down and treat that as a personal contract to yourself.
I love it.
And it doesn't have to be fancy. Like write it down on I'm obsessed with Post-it notes. I love a Post-it note. Pick a Post-it note. One thing that you're just done carrying, one belief or action or practice or behavior, and something that you want to claim or reclaim. And that's it.
Yeah.
And then you write it down and that becomes your contract to yourself.
Yeah. So name your need.
Name your need out loud.
And pick one thing that you've done carrying and something you want to reclaim.
Yep.
Love it.
Because what it is, it's about naming a belief, a habit, an expectation that you want to release and something that you want to introduce into your life. And that alone, just by doing that, writing it down, it could shift everything.
Those are great tips. I love it. I think we could talk it forever. I think there's so many topics. I mean, we haven't really even touched on menopause and the whole.
Oh, geez. Well, it is funny when you say that.
Hormones that left the building. I think
they totally left the building.
So, I mean, maybe a couple of things about that and this myth that we all feel like once the myth that once your period ends, it's done, but it's not done. So, I mean, tell me any thoughts that are coming up.
Yeah.
About that.
Okay. Well, first of all, you have to forgive me because every orifice in my, I just want to say, every orifice in my body is dry these days. Okay. And so the way it's showing up for me the most, my eyes are itching like crazy and my nose itches constantly. So anyway, what I'll say about this is, yes, there are a couple myths. Number one, I think the biggest myth that I carried, and thankfully I realized I was not the only woman, is that once you end your period, right, you go 12 months without a period, I really thought you got to turn in your card, right? You're done. So whatever you experienced up to that, which could have been total hell for you, that you finish that 12-month cycle, you turn in your card, you're done. Okay, that is not true. I am now on like my third wave of postmenopausal symptoms. So that's number one. Number two, and for me personally, I kind of raw dogged this whole thing. I had no hormone help from the time that I think my perimenopause, which back then when I was 38, 39, I didn't even have a word for it because I didn't know what that was. But mine started then. I ended my 47th year with no period. So that was my 12-month period. I was 47. So I did all of that without any kind of hormone therapy. And then went 47 to 55 again with nothing. Because I was just like struggle city. And I bought into the, and not to say that it was a farce, because that's not what I'm saying, but the World Health Initiative study, I had a cancer diagnosis when I was in my early 30s. It was a non-reproductive cancer, but I was just like, hey, I can't do any of this stuff. So I'm just going to kind of raw dog this thing. And then I noticed as I was writing the book, just very fortuitously, I was writing the book, and it was the summer of 25. And I started to notice just some new symptoms that I had never experienced before, and a few that were returning. My rage was coming back a little bit, but my libido was really, really diminishing. And then like my bladder was out of control. I just was like, I had like no control of my bladder. And so I went to my doctor, same OB, 25 years. And I said, and I'm interviewing experts for the book. And one of them, the day before my doctor's appointment, she was like, hey, the best piece of advice I can give to women is if you're being gaslit by your doctor, find a new doctor. You can get help. It's not too late. Because I thought, I'm like 8 years past postmenopause. There's no way I can get help now, whatever. So next day, go to my doctor. And same doctor I've had for 25 years. And I'm like, hey, I'm suffering. And she nods her head. And she says, oh, that's really terrible, isn't it? And I was like, wait, that's the best you can do for me? And then I started talking about the libido thing. And she knows my man lives in Australia for most of the time, so we're not together. So I'm telling her about the libido thing. And she says, well, I think you and your man need to go on more dates. And I was like, are you kidding me now? So that was the last time I saw her. So I took an expert's advice from my book. I found a new doctor and I started very low dose hormone therapy in December of 25. And I've noticed a huge difference. Is everything fixed? No, but things are improving. My sleep is better. Mm-hmm. This new dryness and like the itchiness that's a new fun surprise. My libido's coming back a little bit. But the bottom line there is there's a lot of myths. Yeah. It's not one and done. If you're not getting answers and you're struggling and you're not happy with how you're feeling, talk to your doctor. And if you're not getting any kind of help from your doctor, find a new doctor. Right. Because we don't have to. And that story was like a big run up to like those very 4 points.
No, that's really important.
We don't have to suffer.
It's so many, it's hard to believe at this day and age how many myths there are around menopause. And I think they're slowly getting more, people are starting to talk about it more, but like, it's incredible how little even physicians talk about it. And so I'm glad we talked about that a little bit. And I appreciate your insights on that because that's very important.
It is. And I think the other thing that's happening now is like we're getting flooded with information. It is so hard to decipher. Mm-hmm. Okay, like what do I do with this? But for me, it started with, again, that pause. I don't like the way I'm feeling.
Yeah. So
something is
figure
off.
out why. Figure out why. Yeah.
Figure out why. And I was dissatisfied. I was like, look, I don't want to live the next 20, 30 years of my life with no sexual desire, with exhaustion, with not getting good sleep, with being on and off ragey all the time. Like I'm not going to live. I don't want to live like that.
Yeah.
So then it's like, I have to do something different.
Yeah. So Angela, it sounds like you have a wealth of information in your book and so many different topics that are really important at this stage. And so I really appreciate and there's a lot of topics we went through, but I think just your insights and from your own experience and from the book are very valuable. So I appreciate it. So tell us about where people can find the book. Tell us anything else what's new for you or anything good that you'd like to share around that.
Yeah. So the book is Real Girl's Guide to Midlife. You can buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the places that you love to buy your books. I write a Substack, realgirlsguidetomidlife.com. I write about 3 times a week. So that's been really fun. So I'm continuing to do that. And I'm actually working on a companion piece to the book, which is a little bit more interactive. So you could take some of the small exercises I have in the book and I'll expand on those and really kind of start to do some of the work at your own time, in your own way, out loud, and really kind of just start to make these small changes that I think I certainly wish if I roll back the clock 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I certainly wish I would have had a little bit more clarity on, hey, I was never falling apart. I still am not. I wish somebody would have told me that my body was going to change certainly a lot faster than some other parts. And yeah, it's been a really amazing process to write the book and engage with so many experts and women and folks like yourself. And I just love that our little community is growing and we get to share all the funny, real, unhinged, honest, scary things that are happening to us and to know we're not alone.
Yeah, I think that's a key. And that's one of the reasons I do this podcast is we're not alone. No. We all experience varying degrees of these things in midlife. And it's really important to talk about them. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your insights. And I'd encourage anybody who wants more information or is interested, please go and read Real Girl's Guide to Midlife. And it's been a great conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
You're welcome. What a rich and honest conversation. One of the biggest takeaways from my conversation with Angela is that midlife reinvention is often not about becoming someone completely different. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that got buried under years of responsibility, caregiving, work, loss, and putting everyone else first. Angela reminds us that you do not need a perfect plan to begin. You can start by noticing where you are shrinking, telling yourself the truth about what feels off, and saying what you need out loud. Whether that means saying no, asking for rest, grieving what has changed, or advocating for your health, even a small step can begin to shift something important. And maybe the question to carry with you from this conversation is this: why not me, and why not now? If this episode resonated with you, please share it with another woman who may need to hear it. And if you are navigating a career and life transition and would like support, I'd love to help. You can book a clarity call with me through the link in the show notes to talk through the very issues we discussed today. Until next time, my friend, remember, you're allowed to take up space, choose yourself, and come back home to who you are